What's up, guys? It's Justin from Elite Life Nutrition, and you're listening to the Elite Life Podcast. In today's episode, I want to cover why people need to be taking some type of vitamin or mineral, most likely, even better, a combination of a multivitamin, multivitamins, and multi-mineral supplement, and exactly why this is so important these days. Before I dive into that, I just want to mention, as always, as of late, we are putting up a ton of TikTok videos, so follow us on TikTok at Elite Life Nutrition. Also, our YouTube channel is really being pumped out lately right now, so we're putting out a ton of content, a ton of videos. Like, all these podcasts itself are on YouTube, so you can check out all the YouTube videos, all the podcasts on YouTube video format, but also just their own unique videos themselves. We're posting multiple videos a week, including shorts, the shorter form videos, but also the longer ones as well. So check that out as well. Follow us on YouTube as well. You can find it Justin Stenstrom or Elite Life Nutrition. If you search either one of those, will pop right up, and subscribe to the channel. So TikTok and YouTube are our main platforms right now. Make sure you're following us on both, as well as always the Instagram ones, the Facebooks of the world. Those are always good as well, but the main ones right now are really TikTok and YouTube. We're really going hard on those ones because the reach is just so much better on those platforms than Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram really died off a few years ago as far as how many people you could reach. You really used to be able to reach a ton of fans. Even people that follow you on those platforms used to be able to really get a hold of them and send out messages and reach like 10 to 50% of your audience, depending on how good a post was, or a video post, or whatever it was. A cool picture. But now it's like 1% or less than 1% of your audience actually sees your content on those platforms, which is why we really don't. That's why we're really not promoting those ones as much anymore. I mean, we're still on them. You're still going to find posts and stuff throughout the week, but realistically, the main ones where you can still get reach as of right now, anyways, I mean, it might change tomorrow, but the ones that really give you the best reach are TikTok and YouTube. And it also just so happens that those are some of the easiest ways to put content out there. So that's the ones we're really going on the most, and ones we're promoting the most. So TikTok and YouTube, follow us on both. And of course, as always, follow us, subscribe to our email list, because that's really the place where you get all this information, regardless of if one of these social media platforms wants to change their algorithm, or maybe shadow ban an account for some crazy reason. But anyways, make sure you're following us on those platforms, and let's dive right into today's episode, which is the fact that humans are in need of a lot more nutrition than they're being supplied from their foods. Now, you can eat like a world-class athlete. You can eat like a person training to be a professional gymnast or basketball player or football player or MMA fighter, and just your diet is super clean and you're eating a ton of fruits and vegetables, and you're probably going to be fairly well off as far as in terms of how much vitamins and minerals and other nutrients, amino acids, etc., that your body actually needs. But in general, and even in some of these cases, in general, people just aren't getting enough of certain vitamins and certain minerals, and of course amino acids, but that's a different story. We'll cover that in a different day. I mean, there's a ton of different nutrients as well, just aside from vitamins and minerals that your body needs on a day-to-day basis. But in this episode, we'll just keep it simple and stick to vitamins and minerals, because that's kind of the easiest one to hit. Some of the other ones, it might be a little harder to get some of these specific aminos or specific natural compounds into your system. Or not maybe necessarily harder, but it's kind of a different beast for some things anyways. Or even, neurotransmitters and things like that. Like, your body may not be producing those certain types of neurotransmitters because it's not getting certain foods into its system. And for instance, dopamine comes to mind in that case. Like, your body might not be producing enough, especially as you get a little older, past 30 and such. If you're 20, 22 years old, 25 years old, you're probably in your prime. You don't really need to worry about certain things. But something like dopamine, as you get older, you may not be producing it as much. And an amino acid like tyrosine, for instance, is the precursor to dopamine. And if you have certain foods that have higher tyrosine in it, then you're able to produce dopamine. But even in those certain types of foods, you may not be absorbing it, you might not be eating enough food, etc., etc. So again, that's a different episode for a different day, and we will cover that. But in this episode in particular, I want to stick to the basics, which are vitamins and minerals, the micronutrients of the world. And as it turns out, 70% of the American population is currently deficient in calcium. And these are approximations, of course. It obviously varies, but some of the best studies in the world, or some of the best studies in America, have basically come to a consensus of approximations of these numbers. So 70% of the American population is deficient in calcium. 80% magnesium is deficient in magnesium, which is a super high number. 50% is deficient in vitamin A, along with vitamin C, approximately. Over 50% of the American population is deficient in vitamin D, which is a big one. And in terms of if you're African American, this number is even higher. 90% of the population is deficient in vitamin D. And then elderly people as well. 70% of the elderly population is deficient in vitamin D. And obviously, for African American people, this is obviously because their skin is darker. And because their skin's darker, so you basically absorb most of the vitamin D through sunlight. But because their skin is darker, because of where their ancestors were from, there's more heat there. They actually adapted to protect themselves because they didn't need to have lighter skin, to have fair skin like someone like me. They needed to have darker skin so that the sun didn't burn them all the time. It didn't give them too much of a good thing. And so their skin became darker over time and evolved to be darker. But now some of these people who have moved away from that area over time, now they're not getting enough vitamin D because the sun isn't actually going at the same rate it was where their ancestors were from. So essentially, they have evolved to have darker skin, darker pigment to protect them, which was originally a great thing, so that they wouldn't fry their skin, and then cause some of the problems that too much sun exposure causes, cancer, etc. But then now it's kind of harming them in a sense, because that protection that they have of the darker pigment is actually blocking out the sun and not giving them enough vitamin D in places where they're not surrounded by as much heat or as much sunlight. And so now it's like a lot of these people living in America aren't getting the vitamin D that they need because of the protection that they've had with the darker skin. It's actually blocking out the little sunlight they're getting. Because the thing is, really, in general, and I mentioned this in a couple episodes ago, or in the past episodes, about the fact that people aren't getting out enough. We're not being exposed to natural light enough. We're not being exposed to the outdoors enough, especially since 2020, COVID, etc. A lot of people are sedentary. A lot of people now work from home. A lot of people are actually staying home and they don't actually get outside. They don't have, they don't walk around as much. We don't move around as much. We're not getting the walking that we had, thousands of years ago. Our ancestors walked 8 miles a day. We're lucky if we get, a mile and a half, 2 miles a day. So with that in mind, if we're staying inside a lot more indoors, naturally we're not getting exposure to the sunlight, and naturally we're not getting enough vitamin D. Now, someone like me who's lighter skin probably doesn't need to go out as much because the sun's going right through my skin. And, it's easier for me to get sunburned, by the way. I get sunburned almost every year, even though I try not to, because the first beach day around here, it's so beautiful out, it's tough to resist going out there. But, I apply sunblock too, but there's always one little spot I miss, like on my back or something, and it sucks. But anyways, so that's one of the downsides of having light skin, I guess. But I do tend to absorb vitamin D enough because I absorb it really quickly, because I don't have that protection against it, which, if I lived in Africa or some of these places where they have a lot of heat, a lot of sunlight, I would probably be burnt almost every day, which would not fare well for me. But if you're in America and you're African American, this is something you really got to be cognizant of. 90% of the African American population is deficient in vitamin D, so they really should be supplementing with the vitamin D supplement. or at least make sure they're getting outside pretty much every day. And in like the Northeast where I live, it gets cold. Like even in the wintertime, we really don't have a lot of sun. There's only a few hours a day where the sun's really out. And, it's not even really hot. And that's why seasonal depression tends to be more, it tends to be more prevalent in the northeastern states because of the cold, or even the north, like Midwest, Minnesota, Michigan, those places. It tends to be the seasonal depression tends to be more prevalent, and that's a big part of that. Not all of it, but a big part of that comes down to the vitamin D. So the same thing with the elderly population. Elderly population is 70%. That's the reason for that is that, again, the elderly people tend to be more sheltered. They tend to be more inside. They tend to be more away from walking outside and moving around, and they tend to be in nursing homes and sadly not really being able to move around much. So they're kind of stuck indoors a lot, and the vitamin D levels reflects this. So with that said, it's like a lot of these things: calcium, magnesium, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. These are all major vitamins and minerals. Like even just a magnesium deficiency can cause havoc throughout the body. A calcium deficiency can cause havoc throughout the body. Vitamin C deficiency can cause havoc throughout the body, scurvy. But the thing is, too, with these RDA recommendations, they're already historically very low. I mean, we're talking about vitamin D. You look at work like Linus Pauling did, and he was given human beings like 10 to 12. I think he himself took 10,000 or 15,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day, perfectly fine. And then you look at guys like Andrew Saul, who did the same thing, or who does the same thing currently, the Mega Vitamin Man. He takes these, 10,000 plus milligrams of vitamin C every day, 12,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day, and he's super healthy. But these guys also did research talking about how human beings and guinea pigs and bats, there's one type of bat that don't produce, they're the only mammals that don't produce their own vitamin C internally. So when these animals get sick, when these mammals get sick, their vitamin C levels shoot through the roof because it helps them fight off whatever sickness they're facing, pathogen that they're facing. But human beings don't have this ability anymore. So, we're talking about RDA levels of like 100 milligrams, or maybe 200 milligrams now of vitamin C, which is super low. Because when you're sick, you really need 100x that amount. And so, same thing with across the board, like RDA levels are historically very low. They're very, very conservative. So when we're talking about not even hitting those very conservative numbers, you're very, very deficient in some of these things. Like I would recommend the RDA, the people that oversee the RDA, raise these by 2, 3, 4x, 5x in some cases. Vitamin C should be at least 1,000 milligrams a day. I mean, that's really a healthy minimum. And I would recommend optimally, you're looking more like 5 to 10x that, but RDA should be at least 1,000 milligrams for vitamin C. Magnesium could be probably doubled. Calcium, same thing. Vitamin D could easily be doubled. Vitamin A probably doubled as well. So RDA, I mean, that's just RDA recommendations. Not even optimal functioning levels of vitamins and minerals, but just the bare minimum. And if you're not even hitting that bare minimum, like half the population isn't hitting the bare minimum of vitamin A or C, and 80% of the population isn't hitting the bare minimum of magnesium, we're talking about people that are severely deficient in these minerals and vitamins. And we're talking about downstream effects of, one of the reasons why people are very sick these days. One of the reasons why people have, if they're deficient in magnesium, they start to have mental health conditions. They start to have anxiety or depression or panic attacks, because these things can lead to malfunction in neurotransmitters and things like serotonin, things like GABA production, and things like glycine production. And then you have sleep problems, and then you have exacerbations of these problems, and then you have more and more, and it's just kind of like a vicious cycle. And a lot of people that have some of these conditions, all they really need to do is correct their mineral or vitamin deficiencies. And if you look at the numbers, you look at the deficiencies and how prevalent it really is, you start to see why there's a lot of these conditions that people have. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned Wednesday for another Elite Life Nutrition episode, or Elite Life podcast, I should say. And go to elitelifenutrition.com for the best vitamins, minerals, and supplements in the world.